remind you that Eddie Watkins Jr. is the headline musician at our conference coming up on May 31st, June 1st and 2nd. There will be one heck of a concert on the Saturday night.
Oh, you bet.
There are registration forms on the table at the back. So, understanding is the Booby Prize. You ever lie in bed and look out the window after you wake up in the morning and just kind of look at the trees and the silhouettes of things that are outside your window? And you're just kind of there with it for a little minute, and then your eyes close again, and you continue to see what you saw when your eyes were open. And it's kind of like a reflection of that, but then it kind of changes and morphs. And you know, you were watching these snow-covered mountain ash, and then all of a sudden you realize that now you're seeing a bright red maple tree, and then it becomes a Douglas fir. What is that? What is that? You know, I know there's a scientific explanation about nerves in our eyes and rods and cones and all that stuff, and how our vision works, and light's reflected back to us from objects, and that's why we see. But what is that? What is that? Every time I close my eyes, in the back of my eyelids, I see something. Try it. There's color, there's patterns, there's shapes, what is that? What is that we're seeing? Is it energy? What is it? I don't know. I don't know. I do jigsaw puzzles every once in a while, and you know, if you work on a jigsaw puzzle for a few hours, later on in the day you're working at the computer and you see all these jigsaw puzzle shapes. You've done that? What is that? You ever pull weeds? Pull weeds all day long, you go to bed at night and you see these dandelions just as clear as can be. You're at your computer, you close your eyes, and you still see the screen. You still see the screen. And somebody sends you an email and it's got a bunch of dots on it, and you're supposed to look at the dots and then look over here at a white wall and you see the face of Jesus. You got that one? What is all that stuff? Every time I close my eyes, I see something, and I want to know what that is I see. I want to know what that is I see. The scientific explanations, of course, don't always hold true, because science doesn't understand this stuff any more than we do. But that's one of my favorite forms of meditation, is just to lie there with my eyes closed and watch whatever that is. Watch it. Do you ever watch music inside? People are thinking, I'm starting to get a reputation because I see music. But you know, this is true of our other senses too. Some people hear differently than others. I go crazy if the kettle is boiling. I cannot handle it. Nobody else in the house notices it. Leave the kitchen tap running? Yeah. My parents used to have a TV set that gave off a very high-pitched hum. A squeal, it would drive me out of the house. My parents never heard it. Never heard it. We all know that there's frequencies that, you know, a dog whistle that's beyond the human hearing. But is it? What is all that? Why do things sound different? What's the sounds that we hear from inside? You know, the scientific explanation is there's sound waves that hit our eardrums and make it vibrate. But what's that sound I hear inside my head, that little still small voice? And what is it that enabled the deaf Beethoven to write music? What is that? And touch. And I know many of you have felt this because I've talked to some of you, and I felt it myself. Not long after someone has passed away, you have a sense of their presence in the room. It's usually not, sometimes people actually feel like somebody's touched them on the shoulder, but for the most part, it's just a sense, a feeling that doesn't fit the scientific explanation. What is that stuff? You know, what is it? And yet, our scientific explanation, the criteria for being able to prove something is supposed to be that observation, right? Sight, sound, touch, smell, taste. It's supposed to be proof. But what is it when I see something that nobody else sees? Is that real or not? What is that? So that brings up the whole question of just what is reality? What is reality? Well, the dictionary didn't help me very much because it tells me that reality is the state of being real. So I went to Ernest Holmes. And Ernest Holmes says, he says, Reality is the truth about anything. Reality actually means that which is indestructible, incapable of decay. Reality is unchanging and everlasting. The self we see is what man has thought about himself, the form he has molded by his thought. The real self is perfection, for God could not know anything unlike itself. Our sonship is reality, Christ abiding in us. The kingdom of God within is reality. Reality as concerning man is that God in man, as man, is man. So he says reality is unchanging and everlasting. If that is so, most of what we consider real isn't. Because most of what we can see and touch and prove is temporary. It's going to break down. It's going to decay. These chairs, this building, these bodies are going to decay and break down. They are lodged in time. That makes them unreal. Woo. So the stuff we see with our eyes closed, the unreal stuff we hear in our head, is that the real reality? I don't know. I'm not going to tell you. I'm just going to ask the questions. So we need to think, or we used to think, that if we couldn't touch, taste, smell, feel, or hear something, it wasn't real. And now this turns that whole thing on its head. It almost says if we can do those things, it's not real. So I want us to be not so quick to dismiss those things that we don't understand, that we can't prove scientifically. Ernest Holmes doesn't have a definition of understand, so I had to go back to the dictionary, and it said, to understand is to comprehend the meaning and significance of something. Now, I don't know about you, but most of the things that seem really significant to me, I don't understand. Like when I stand outside and look up at that night starry sky, that's significant. I have no idea what it is. When I listen to music and suddenly my eyes tear up and my feet start to move and I start conducting an orchestra involuntarily, that is something significant to me, and I don't understand that. And most of the stuff I understand doesn't really seem very significant, you know? So I'm wondering whether being overwhelmed, whether overwhelmed maybe, is the opposite of understand. One starts with over, the other starts with under, right? Maybe the stuff we understand isn't really all that important at all. So maybe the real things is the really big significant things that overwhelm us. I like being overwhelmed, do you? When you stop and think about it, is understanding real that great? Does it really change very much? I don't know. But how often have we dismissed things simply because we don't understand them? Anybody ever done that? And why do we do that? Well, I think a lot of it is for fear of what people will think about us. You know, I'm a sucker for credibility. I don't want people to think I got sucked in by some cult here. You know, I want to. This is logical. This is real. We're afraid of what people think of us if we don't fit the mold and think the way everybody else fits, right? If we're not sensible, if we're not logical, if we're not scientific. We want to keep up a good front. We want to be thought of intelligent. Anybody here would like to be thought of as intelligent? Have common sense? She's smart. But you know, there's a difference between intelligence and wisdom. We're going to get there in a minute. So, the scientific method, all that stuff, we are taught that the universe is this great big machine, this mechanistic theory that the universe and everything in it is a machine that can be predicted and understood. Right? We don't believe that anymore. We now know that we will never understand it. We don't need to protect this great triumph of intellect, triumph of science over superstition. And I've been thinking to myself too, what does superstition mean? It's another one of those words that's derogatory, well, that's superstitious. But when I look at it, I'm going to go back to the dictionary. The first part of that is super, meaning above, right? I'm going to take another look at superstition. But nonetheless, the unexplainable continues to happen. We continue to have miraculous healings from alternative therapies that we don't understand, right? Psychic phenomena continue to happen and we don't understand them. Animals continue to act in astonishing ways. Do you know that about animals? Homing pigeons. What is that? What is that? And we've all heard about animals who have found their way home through thousands of miles, you know, against extraordinary odds, and they make their way home. What is that? We've all heard about dogs that go sit at the door when it's time for the master to come home from work, right? You've probably experienced such a dog. We used to have one that my mother said could hear my father's car coming 10 miles away. That was the explanation. I'm not sure that that is the explanation. There was a couple, this is an undocumented, it's not a scientific study, but it's a study they did, an informal study, a couple. The wife was working in the office downtown, the husband was at home. They decided to keep a record of, the wife would keep a record of what time she started doing various things, and the husband would keep a record of what time the dog started waiting at the door. What they found was the dog went to the door at the time the wife left somewhere with the intention of going home. So if she left the office coming straight home, the dog went to the door when she was leaving the office. However, if she was going to the dry cleaners on the way home, the dog went to the door when she left the dry cleaners. So when she started an activity with the intention that that activity would bring her home, that's when her dog started to wait at the door. What is that? Is it possible that the dumb animals, the animals that we're so much smarter than, have some kind of capability that we don't have? And if we really are so much smarter than them, is it possible that we do have that capability, and because we don't understand it, we ignore it, we don't focus on it, and it becomes untrue for us? Is all that possible? Could we use some of that other stuff? So we think if we can't understand it, if we can't use it, it isn't there. But we're not talking about physical stuff here. We're talking about something on a different level. So why do we need to understand it physically and scientifically? I have a lot of stuff on this. So there's all sorts of things out there that we don't understand that may or may not be true. Now, I don't understand astrology, but I know lots of people do. I don't understand tarot cards, but I know lots of people do, and there's a reality on that. Now, I think astrology and tarot cards and crystals and automatic writing and all those stuff really interesting, fascinating, amusing, fun even. But I don't understand them. I don't understand them. I wouldn't say I believe in them, but I definitely wouldn't say that I disbelieve in them, because I don't know. What is that stuff? What is all these different ways of knowing things that we don't know, we don't even know? And somebody once said, there's all the stuff we know, all the stuff we don't know, and all the stuff we don't even know we don't know. And that's a huge piece of the pie, right? So we have all these attempts to understand the understandable. The ununderstandable. That's what all religions are, isn't it? That's what all these New Age disciplines are. It's all an attempt to understand that which we can't understand. And maybe we will never be able to understand them, and maybe we just have to be satisfied to be overwhelmed by them. Isn't that a great sense of wonder? I mean, wonder is a wonderful thing. Maybe that's why it's called wonder. But it's not the horoscopes and the crystals and the tarot cards and the methods of getting to that power that's important. What's important is the power itself. The power itself, whatever it is, that's what's important. And that doesn't need us to do any instrumentation and interpreting and any of that stuff. We just have to use it, because it just is. It just is, whether we understand it or not. You get that? There is this magnificent power in the universe, and we can use it whether we understand it or not. It's not It's not. It's the things that we see with our eyes closed. It's the things that we hear with our ears closed. I don't know, I still hear stuff in there, do you? Yeah, it goes on and on and on. I wear earplugs at night. The noise is still there, I'll tell you. Albert Einstein, who was possibly the greatest logical thinker of all times, but also one of the greatest philosophers of all times, he said, "Every man knows that in his work he does best and accomplishes most when he has attained proficiency that enables him to work intuitively." Right? That is, there are things which we come to know so well that we do not know how we know them. So it seems to me in matters of principle. Perhaps we live best and do things best when we are not too conscious of how and why we do them. It's just part of us. So perhaps we just know when things are right for us. You ever get that? We talked about that in our communications workshop last week. That's one of our rights of being assertive, is to just know what's right for us and not having to explain it to anybody else. Nobody else has to understand. We just know what's right for us. And that's the difference between the understanding, which is right for our intellect, and our wisdom, which is a manifestation of our intuition, our connection with a higher power. Another quick quote from Einstein. He warned against reading too much. He said, "Much reading after a certain age diverts the mind from its creative pursuits. Any man who reads too much and uses his own brain too little falls into lazy habits of thinking, just as the man who spends too much time in the theaters is apt to be content with living vicariously instead of living his own life." If he only knew how much TV intrudes into our lives today. But isn't that interesting? Even reading. You know, we say every week, I don't tell you the truth here. There is no one truth. We make suggestions here that cause you to think and discover your truth. That's why we come together and share. Remember King Solomon in the Bible? The two women went to him fighting over the baby. And what was his solution? Cut the baby in half. And of course, the one who cared enough about the baby to give up her share was the mother. What if King Solomon had tried to solve that dilemma logically? And what would he have done? He'd have had court hearings and home study cases and legal documents and stuff. And the kid had been grown up by the time he got there. Our intuition is a wonderful, wonderful, powerful tool. It's a wisdom as opposed to our intelligence. Tennyson said, "Knowledge comes, but wisdom lingers." And Charles Fillmore, who is the founder of Unity, says, "Intellectual understanding comes first in the soul's development, then a deeper understanding of principles follows until the whole man ripens into wisdom." So in a way, understanding, it's not the Booby Prize, but it's really just the beginning step, the first rung on the ladder. So I urge you, please don't get too hung up on logic and reason and understanding, and allow yourself to be overwhelmed by reality, that which is everlasting, unchanging, and perfect, that which is you. Namaste.